Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of The Balanced Lens, where we talk about faith, culture, and politics from a Christian worldview and hopefully balanced. I'll try to stay balanced today. Today's election day 2025, where we're talking about Zoran Mamdani, probably the most watched election race of the day. Why so? He's a democratic socialist and set to become the next mayor of New York City, the largest city in the United States with 8.8 million people. And so a very interesting guy here. So who is he? What was his upbringing like? Bidget, you want to lead us off here?
Yeah, sure. He's a pretty young guy, actually. So Mamdani is only like 34 years old. He was born in Uganda. That's where his parents were. Both of his parents actually were born in India. His dad was born in Mumbai. His mom was born in now Odessa. And he came to the US when he was very, very young. And he grew up here. He was in Manhattan, grew up in our in the school system there. So his mom is actually acclaimed Indian filmmaker. A lot of people probably have watched the movie Monsoon Wedding. She's she's a director of that movie, and his dad is actually an academic, and he's a political theorist. Mahmoud Mamdani, that's his name. He was elected in 2020. That is his first experience in office with the New York State Assembly from District 36, and as a democratic socialist, that is his platform, democratic socialist, and it's affiliated with what the DSA movement in the US, which is the Democratic Socialists of America. From an experience perspective, he's worked as a housing counselor for petents who are facing eviction. He's participating in grassroots organizations, organizing in the Queens area around housing and immigrant rights. He was part of actually Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, and then he also ran as part of the Democratic Socialist Association slate, and he was elected to the assembly after that. So he's very brief political experience in the US, but he's been involved and he's experienced a lot of the trials and he's seen a lot of the pain from which he has drawn some of his opinions and his stance on different things.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I didn't know that his mom was Mira Nair until like 2 days ago. I mean, she's a very popular filmmaker, and his dad was a professor at Columbia, as you alluded to. But what draws voters to him? Why is he about to win? I mean, Polymarket has him today at 80%. Most likely will win today unless there's a major upset.
Yeah, I think for his popularity, you have to look at his style of politics. Because he's younger, he is very tech savvy. He effectively uses social media, and that resonates with a lot of young voters. And he typically brings in a lot of younger voters. He's also multilingual, multicultural. So he brings in the cultural elements, and he has a strong grassroots campaign, which is very hard to get. And his platform is based off of a lot of the issues that young voters deal with: affordable housing, transit, deep economic issues, to just name a few. And I think his platform resonates with a lot of younger people because of that.
Yeah, what's interesting, to tag on what you said, how did New York City get to where it was, right? I mean, things are expensive there, undoubtedly. Two things to note: rent regulation, tenant protections have been in place for New York City a long time. Um, the unintended consequence of this has been that supply has gone down. You've driven up prices in the city. You've disincentivized landlords to actually, maintain units, create more opportunities for renting. So you've driven up prices in the city through these types of policies. Secondly, in New York City, you've had a lot of restrictive land use policies, creating an undersupply of units. We'll talk about this more in a second, but these problems have persisted in New York City prior to this race. And so it's created this environment where things are just wildly expensive compared to other cities. But, moving on to his political platform, there's a lot of things on his website, a lot of things that he said that he stands by, that he's really advocating and pushing for in this election. One of those things is rent control. Tejo, what's rent control? Can you break that down for us?
Thinking I watched a few of Mamdani's videos. I don't know if you guys know, but right out of college, or around when he was in college, he used to rap. Like, he's a pretty cool dude, right? If you watch his videos, he's very elegant. When he speaks, he's careful with his words. I've watched several videos where he interacts with TV personalities and journalists, and he doesn't get trapped easily. He's really good at um, getting his thoughts out without falling into any traps. I think recently, as I'll give you a quick example. Recently, I think it was in the Fox News show. Somebody asked him about Trump saying that he's going to block funds from New York City or something along those lines. And his response was just like, as the mayor of the city, I will work with the president to make sure that everything that we want to do, that we align on, we're able to implement. Something very along those lines. He completely eluded the trap that was set. And I thought it was very elegant. So I'm not at all surprised that he is very
he's
sharp
very
on the words.
polished. So going back to the housing and rent, his basic premise is freeze rent increase for all rent stabilized apartments. He wants to build, his platform proposes building 200 new permanently affordable rent stabilized homes over the next 10 years and increase enforcement against bad landowners and lords, and then to create an office of deed theft prevention. And there's details in what that means. What I do want to focus in on is, can he do that? And I'm sorry, not can he do that, but has that historically been done before? Unfortunately, with a lot of younger voters, they don't know their history. They don't know the fact that this has actually been tried before by the USSR in the 80s and 90s. And unfortunately, with the socialist agendas, these things just don't work. One of the things you could learn from history is that when you try to control rent and build government subsidized homes, who have chronic shortages and rationing of homes, right? Because you have a whole population of people that you're promising homes to, and unfortunately New York has a lot more than 200,000 people, but the same message is going out to everyone. So now everyone thinks like, oh, I'm going to get affordable housing. So you have these long queues that kind of start piling up, and then you have this disaster of government trying to build homes. The government can't do anything efficiently. It can't do anything well. And because of that, you have subpar homes being built. And again, you could, this is all free information. You can go Google USSR rent control in the 1980s and 1980s. It went to a collapse where you had a huge demand but not enough supply.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, you disrupt supply side, supply demand economics. Frozen rents mean that landlords will fail to upgrade buildings. They do the bare minimum. Developers don't want to build if rent is frozen. And so you have a major disruption to demand and supply economics here. Another one of his policies he talks about on his website is the Department of Community Safety. I'll read this. He says, through this new city agency and whole of government approach, community safety will be prioritized like never before in NYC. The department will invest in citywide mental health programs and crisis response, including deploying dedicated outreach workers in 100 subway stations, providing medical services in vacant commercial units, and increasing transit ambassadors to assist New Yorkers on their journeys. I don't know if you've ever gone into a New York City subway. I've done it at night. I've walked through by myself. You got to keep your head on a swivel. You don't know what's going to come out of anywhere. The problem with his approach, in my opinion, mentally ill people don't want to leave the street. They don't want to leave the subway. The loving thing to do is to actually take them off the street, get them the help they need. Sending a counselor to talk to them about their problems on the subway is not going to help. And I think most people that look at this proposal would say the same thing. Another one of his proposals is $30 per hour minimum wage by 2030. What do you guys think about that?
So again, you this has been tried in history before, and if you go to Chile in the 1970s to 1973, Chile tried to do this, where they instituted a higher minimum wage, and what it led to was explosive inflation and shortages. The economy was completely destabilized within 3 years, and that actually led to a coup. Um, and the reason for that is rapid wages and price control plus monetary expansion led to fiscal imbalance fueled by inflation and scarcity of goods. So just dumbing it down, or sorry, not dumbing it down, but simplifying it, you have a lot of people with a ton of money. The supply and the demand of stuff is not caught up with the fact that people that didn't have money, now all of a sudden everyone has a lot of money. That leads to overinflation, which cripples the local economy. And not to mention, like, when you couple together a lot of these ideas together, it hurts, right? It's exponentially bad. Where you want to control rent, you give people minimum wage, and we'll get into this, but taxing top earners, small police force, like when you do all of these things together and layer it on, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, interesting. My McDonald's near me, I walked in a couple months ago and there's all kiosks now, and what happens is you increase minimum wage too quickly. And don't get me wrong, I think we're all for decent, good wages, but companies look for the next best alternative. Am I going to outsource my job? Am I going to get a kiosk? Am I going to replace this with AI? So there's also a threat there. He
Exactly
also
right.
talks about yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. So where he's trying to get to is a good place. The intent is good, but how you get there is also important. So one of the things about this, the minimum wage, fortunately or unfortunately for him, is that he does not have the authority to do it. It has to be done via the state legislator. So it's a good idea, but he'll have to wait till he gets selected to a state position for making influence there.
Yeah, great points. Another thing he wants to implement, and this has been all over the news, a free bus program all over New York City. Now, he says it'll cost $700 million annually. The MTA predicts it'll cost $1 billion. Now, other cities have tried this. Kansas City had launched a free fare bus program in 2020. This year, they're pulling the plug on it. They ran out of money when they tried free buses. Similarly, Olympia, Washington, they had to raise a sales tax to pay for it. Portland, Oregon, they did the same thing. The quality of rides decreased. There was vandalism. Homeless people camped out on the bus all day. The Washington Post said that parents would grow afraid to let their children ride alone. Even here in Philadelphia, we see similar situations where the cost of public busing is sometimes so cheap that you find people that are homeless or perhaps selling drugs, just sitting on the bus and occupying a place and making it much more dangerous than it should be. So big unintended consequence of that. He also wants early childhood. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one more point, like for freezing the rent, stabilizing the rent, building homes, the mayor of New York does not have the power to do that. They would need massive state and federal funding. And keep in mind, New York is one of the most beneficial of already huge state and federal funding. Unfortunately, Mamdani has a lot of great ideas, but it's like a rich kid going to a store pretending to be poor. He does not understand what he's saying with a lot of these political plans that he has. He has a lot of lofty ideas and very little details in how he's actually going to accomplish them.
Yeah, and one of the things he does say, he says he wants to raise taxes on top earners and corporations. Teja, what do you think about that?
I mean, there's a lot of examples of raising taxes on top earners and corporations. I'm just going to highlight one. Venezuela did this in 2013 to 2020. You could look it up in the daily news. They had an economic collapse, hyperinflation, their GDP contracted, mass exodus of people leaving, and then that led to political repression. And the primary reason for that is over centralized state control, fiscal mismanagement, loss of private sector capacity, right? The problem with that idea of raising taxes on top earners is you're limiting the ability of the top earners to create more business. You need money, you need innovation to create more innovation, right? That doesn't just come from pulling back, right? There's actually a lot of case studies where you have CEOs that take over businesses that are struggling. One of the first things they do is kill R&D. They kill any type of expenditures that are not necessary for the business and to do daily operations. And what you have is a short-term spike of money, right? Like you used to spend $1 billion on R&D, you get that $1 billion back. Like you're a genius as a CEO, right? You made $1 billion out of nothing. Unfortunately, in the long term, what you see is those companies absolutely fail because you stifle creativity, you stifle innovation. The same thing applies to government and corporations. You have to allow the market to dictate its terms and conditions. On the If you look at the heart of it, the problem is corporations have become really greedy. The top 5% of any corporation, if you look at the CEOs and the COOs, CTOs, and the VPs, their pay has exponentially grown compared to um, the workers that are doing the actual day-to-day jobs, the individual contributors. You need to fix that. Like there needs to be some sort of equilibrium. Unfortunately, taxing the top earners and using that money to fund social programs is not the answer. Time in and time out, history has proven that causes a collapse of the economy. It doesn't help you.
I was just going to say at one point, thankfully, like he cannot do this anyway. So this is he needs state legislator and governor approval. Again, good idea. Understand the intent, but we'll have to figure out how to make this work a little differently.
Yeah, what's interesting, there was a poll conducted by JL Partners for the Daily Mail that found that 9% of New York City residents would definitely leave the city if Mamdani wins. 9% is roughly 765,000 New York City residents. New York City has a population of 8.5 million. So even if that number is cut in half, let's suppose that stat is wrong and it's 5%, you're looking at 500,000 people leaving the city. Now, what's also interesting, the top 1% of the city taxpayers provide 48% of the city's revenue. Any common sense person will say, hey, let me just move a few miles over into Jersey or Connecticut, take my business or take my house there, and now you have a lower tax base. So that's interesting.
I'm pretty certain that Mamdani's proposal is to match the high-end tax bracket with New Jersey's, just because you mentioned that, I'm just saying it. So he's not trying to go above and beyond. He's saying, let's match New Jersey's. When you mentioned about people leaving New York, I was reminded of the umpteen number of people who threatened to leave the US if Trump won the presidency. So what people say and what people do are not necessarily correlated like fully.
I
True,
knew
but
you
remember,
were going to go there,
Pennsylvania
Bridget.
is not far away, and neither's Connecticut. So they're
Well,
neighboring states. And as a realtor in Philadelphia, I can attest to the fact that a lot of people have moved out of New York City and driven up prices here.
yeah, so like I knew you were going to go to that point, Bidju, to be balanced. But you can actually again go to history. When California started their 1% tax, a lot of their top earners did leave. California had huge impact financially that they're still dealing with today. So that 5%, I guarantee you, it's the top, the 5% that said, or the 9% that they will leave. It's the top 1% that will leave. New Jersey instituted something similar where they saw a mass exodus of their top earners leaving New Jersey because they were starting to tax a lot of people. So New Jersey instituted a law that said you can leave New Jersey, but they will tax you 10% or something, or 50% of your income, some ridiculous number of your income, to actually leave the state of New Jersey if you buy a house outside of New Jersey. People know that cities and states have the power to do that. So the people that are going to leave are your higher earners, because they're pretty well, like when you have a lot of money, you have a lot of things to lose, and you're going to stay on top of that. So I'm pretty sure what you'll see is a top exodus of people leaving, of your top earners. So what that will lead to is a lot of these ideas that he's going to have, guarantee you can go back to this podcast, guarantee you a year and a half after Mamdani wins, if he does win, if you go and look at the financial situation of New York, it's going to be drastic. On the short term, you'll have an uprise of his ideas and plans. Hey, rah, rah, rah. But if you go and look at the financial situation of his city, because simply he won running on a socialist platform, you will have a mass exodus of people leaving, and you'll see that financial impact only a year and a half after he takes office.
Yeah, really interesting. Another thing he has not committed to in his platform is to increasing the police force. The number of officers in the NYPD is at its lowest in 20 years, below 34,000. Now, outgoing Mayor Eric Adams wanted to increase the ranks to 40,000. Mamdani has not made a commitment to that, and he's actually supported positions in shrinking the agency. So that's an interesting point about his platform. Another interesting thing that's made the news is this concept of city-run grocery stores with controlled prices. Tejo, what do you think about that?
So I'll start with the fact that he does not have the power to do that. He is literally like a kid in a candy store, and he has no idea how politics run. Actually, I'm going to get on a soapbox at the end of this with the whole people just don't understand how government works. So in Cuba, 1960s to actually the present day, grocery stores are city owned. They're run by the government. What you have are decades of rationing, the persistent shortages and periodic cuts to rations. The reason for this is state government just is not an efficient business, right? Government, you look at any government, they run on bureaucracy where people are just paid a regular paycheck. You're not incentivized to work harder. There's like pay structures that you have to hit, and they're not tied to your actual performance of the business unit that you're running. The government's promotion is tied to years of service. So the longer you stay there, or the longer you participate in their pension, that's how you get paid more. It is not tied to how efficiently you're running your business. So because of that, what you see is people just do the bare minimum. They clock in and clock out. And I'm not trying to throw shade on any federal or state employees. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just looking at history. And if you look at Cuba, one of the things you can learn is that their grocery stores are not efficiently run. And when you put that emphasis on a government entity to do that, the downside of it is you don't have entrepreneurs that step in and find new and innovative ways of running their stores, right? You don't have a prime example is in Philadelphia, you have a lot of Indian grocery stores that grew up in the seven or sorry the and you saw a lot of competition that happened, and because there was competition, prices were lower but your supplies were higher. So you have people that would go into different grocery stores just to buy particular items, and that helped the actual industry flourish. When you have a city-owned grocery store, that doesn't happen anymore. Prices are leveled off, and unfortunately, like the supply won't be there to satisfy the need because there's no need for the supply. You would need to have infrastructure built within New York City to do grocery stores, right? That's controlled by the city. Unless New York City is planning to go into farming, planning to go into dairy agriculture or cattle farming, it just does not make sense. So then you need to pay more money for the same amount of stuff that now you're going to charge your population at a discount. Like the finances does not make sense there.
Yeah, so I think the key issue is stuff is expensive, right? And I think that's an issue that both parties have not answered well. And so this idea of the city-run grocery store has a lot of fanfare and a lot of attraction for that reason. The underlying theory behind it, though, of providing a store where there's no property taxes or rent because it's in a city-owned buildings, I think would adversely affect the many immigrant-owned small businesses in New York City. And so I think that would be an unintended effect of this. Now, if you look at a successful example of a city-run grocery store, there's a supermarket called St. Paul's Supermarket in St. Paul, Kansas. It was successful, but it was a small town. The city took over a store that was there for over 20 years, and it was a sole provider of groceries in the region. And so that was successful, but I don't think would translate well to a big city. I think a better solution is if you really want to drive down the cost of food and groceries, provide incentives for small businesses to move into the city, lower
Absolutely
taxes,
agree.
eliminate different types of regulations that are preventing stores from setting up. Right now, you have Tons of red tape, tons of regulation, tons of bureaucracy. Make that easier for businesses to go in and set up their stores. Another position he talks about. Sorry, go ahead.
You made a really good point, and I want to highlight that. The problem with New York City and Philadelphia and these major cities is there is no incentive for the small business to get involved in it. And then you put on top of it all of the unions that are associated with just getting cargo into the city, moving that stuff around. There's so much red tape, not just from bureaucracy, but unions and labor forces, contracts, negotiation. It is a mess to try to start a grocery store in Philadelphia or New York City. You have health inspectors that will come in, and unless you pay them somehow and give them a logical reason to actually allow you to do the store, they're not going to do it. I'm not saying that those things are not needed. I'm saying that over time, these things have gotten so bloated that it's impossible to do business there. You got to fix that.
Great point there. Another position that he stated that's not explicitly listed on his website. He wants to close Rikers by 2027. Rikers is, a jail there with houses some of the worst criminals. He wants to move those criminals into local boroughs. The problem is these replacement jails in the boroughs are behind schedule. Even if they were built, they would hold 3,000 fewer inmates than the 7,000, currently held at Rikers. Another point that he has made in the news is decriminalizing prostitution. Now, he has a murky position on this. He has openly said that he opposes legalizing prostitution, but also supports positions of decriminalizing sex work. Now, sex work, prostitution, whatever you want to call it, lowers the quality of life in neighborhoods, puts women at risk. Other big cities like Los Angeles have tried decriminalizing sex work. It's led to more child sex trafficking. Now, police can't stop prostitutes to make sure that they're of age, or pimps might exploit them. And so unintended consequences of that.
I think a lot of these ideas where you're legalizing drugs, you're allowing for prostitution, where you're decriminalizing things that are normally on a Judeo-Christian basis, which the United States is based off of, you have this idea that humans are naturally good people, right? Unfortunately, human nature is evil, right? The Bible talks about this explicitly. People, when you give them an opportunity to do good and no one's watching, typically will take the easy route out. And so what you have is the strong will prey on the weak. And that is just how humans are. From the beginning of time, the strong will always prey on the weak. And when you talk about legalizing prostitution, women, and this is a controversial topic, but women are physically weaker than men. And if you don't, as a society, acknowledge that, and you don't protect women and women's rights, like not women's rights where everyone is equal and everyone should do everything, but understanding the fact that women are taken advantage of in society, like they have for millennia, you're going to have a society where you allow criminals to run the city. You're going to have criminals becoming profit. So when they got rid of, when they legalized marijuana, right? One of the big things is the cartels that were doing this for years in secret now had a streamlined business model to bring in drugs at a cheaper rate than the local economy that could support it. And because of that, criminal enterprises became much more profitable. And because they were much more profitable, they funneled that money into other criminal activities that are still harder to do, right? Because now they have more legal money to drive into illegal businesses. That's just human nature. People will surprise you when no one's watching to their ability to do more evil. Good does not come out of human nature, unfortunately. It takes something supernatural to change a person. Like, you need a moral compass to have morals. If you don't have a moral compass, you're not going to have morals. There's like almost no proof of that.
Yeah, and this was subject of one of the last debates where he was criticized for not having a clear position on this. That's why it was interesting to bring this up. But finally, what's interesting about New York City, they have a total liabilities of $300 billion last year. That's 4 times that of LA, Chicago, and Atlanta. Yet the city council has refused any cuts to his $150 billion budget. Mamdani has not offered a proposal, to my knowledge, on how to save the city money. So interesting how, he will manage a city with a huge amount of debt. So now interesting, he also has some controversial positions here that I'm going to call out. As an assemblyman, the New York Post reports that he called the NYPD racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. His positions are lined with anti-Semitic undertones. He made this statement recently. He said, "We have to make clear that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF." He also wrote a song called Giving His Love to the Holy Land Five. The Holy Land Five, they helped finance Hamas. They were sent to prison for 65 years. He's posed with the co-conspirator of the 1993 World Trade Center. He is a mentee of the anti-Semite Linda Sarsour. He's a big supporter of BDS, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctioning the Support of Israel from Other Countries, which, in my opinion, is a very fine line with anti-Semitism, because many proponents of BDS don't take the time to differentiate between people from those who actually support Israel. And so these are controversial positions of his. He is an ardent supporter of Palestine. Again, we love the Palestinian people. They're made in the image of God, but there are many anti-Semitic undertones in his positions as well. Any final thoughts as we wrap up on this topic?
So like we have to figure out how to solve some of the inequalities we are seeing, right? So the income gap in the US is growing. Our debt is going up. Our income gap is going up, which means real and perceived inequality is going up. And this is in the face of, keep in mind that recent graduates, right, are finding it really hard to find a job, are finding it really hard to afford a home, to afford the rent. This is the backdrop. So these are real problems that the voters are faced with, and they have not found a reprieve from it. And that is something that has to be solved. Mamdani has come up with his positions. It's interesting that you mentioned about New York City being in the red from a budget perspective, because the state of New York still has to balance their budget by law, which means that they're borrowing it from other places, I guess. How else do you stay in the red and still maintain a balanced budget at the state level? But again, this is something that they need to think. We need to think through as a society, right? How do we help the next generation, lift them up? And certain people have it a little more easier, right? Like we have the ability to get our kids into better school systems, move to better communities, get them the education they need to get into better colleges. Maybe we are able to afford it, but there are a lot of people who can't, and there are a lot of parents who are working two jobs, three jobs just to get by. We have to solve this problem in the US. Like this is something that we really need to seriously think how to solve. And what I would want to also think through in one of our podcasts is there something we can learn from other places? I know on the one side we have Cuba, Venezuela, but on the other side we still have places like Singapore and some of the Nordic countries as well. So it'll be interesting for us to figure out how to run a country in a balanced way, where we are clearly able to demonstrate Christ's love, stay within the Judeo-Christian framework, make sure that the people who are fallen on hard times, unfortunately, across generations or within their own generation, still has a way to come out of it. It's something that I would like us to think through a little bit deeper, discuss, and kind of help figure out.
I'll add. I think like we tend to forget. I don't even know where to start with this topic. There's so many things that I get bugged out about. Like this is not hard to solve, right? Like these problems aren't catastrophic. If you look at the Great Depression, how do we get out of the Great Depression? We helped the farmers. We helped the businesses that needed help as a country, and we propped out an entire industry that was fundamental to U.S. surviving. We should probably do a podcast on that. Like I think as a society, we got caught up in all these things that don't matter. Like, I'm sorry, but sex and gender equality, what the heck does that have to do with helping the average person? The Democratic Party, and, I love Bill Myers. Like, if you listen to his stuff, like, they are focused on all these ideological things that just don't solve stuff. that actually history has proven is the wrong thing to go after. We need to focus on the problems that people are having. How do we prop up industries that can create wealth and jobs in society? How do we incentivize businesses to create jobs that pay a livable wage? How do you incentivize businesses to not pay, your dividends and your top earners, but turn around and invest that money back into the populace that needs it, right? We need a sense of America. We need a sense of patriotism, right? Like if you look at Rockefeller and Carnegie, they had a sense that they were American, that they were going to invest in America and make sure America is successful. If you look at Henry Ford, he raised the minimum wage for his factory workers because he wanted to help the factory workers, right? Like he wanted to have quality workers. Why is, we keep saying manufacturing is dead in America, but if you look at Taiwan and China, like how is China able to create a middle class of factory workers? Because they have highly employees that know how to make chips. You can't start a business like that in America? Are you kidding me? Like there's a whole generation of people that are willing to learn and be educated. I don't think these problems are hard to solve if we just put aside this ideological thinking and we're not scared to say the things that we have to say.
Yeah, excellent point, guys. I think Mamdani's popularity highlights these fundamental fissures and disruptions that we have underlying our society that have to be addressed. So we'll see how the night turns out. It is election night here, and we'll see maybe how we can follow up on this podcast and talk about these issues more. For those of you listening, thank you so much. Encourage you guys to like and subscribe and join us again next week for another episode of The Balanced Lens.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.